The Vikings is a 1958 historical fiction swashbuckling adventure movie directed by Richard Fleischer. The screenplay is by Calder Willingham, but the adaptation of the Edison Marshall novel The Vikings from 1951 was handled by Dale Wasserman. This tale of love and revenge follows Einar, son of Ragnar, and a slave, Eric. Both fall in love with the same woman, a captured English queen named Morgana. As the rivalry mounts, blood is soon spilt, leading to a cinematic battle in England, a la a Viking Age double dragon. We begin this tale with a tapestry done in a style similar to the Bayeux tapestry, with a voiceover we learn of the North people and the Vikings. It's entertaining enough, but parts are over-exaggerated.
Exploited their skill as shipbuilders to spread a reign of terror, then unequaled in violence and brutality in all the records of history.
But the important part you need to take away is that a Viking's life goal is death, with a sword in hand, so that they may go into Valhalla's halls. We then cut to a brutal raid being led by Ragnar, played by Ernest Borgnine. After killing a man, he helps himself to his wife. One time lapse later, and it turns out that man was King Edwin. This leads to Aella, played by Frank Thring, inheriting the throne. With the queen having no children, the Aella's kinghood is secured. However, this doesn't sit well with the queen, who holds a secret.
Brother Godwin, I am with child, but not Edward's. The child is that of the Viking, Ragnar.
But that must wait, as the ceremony must go on. Well, that puts a damper on things. Later, the Queen and Father Godwin plot to send the child to a monastery in Italy, with the true pommel of the sword, Rectequa.
The holy sword, Requita.
We skip again, this time 20 years. Geez, this movie's going the Assassin's Creed 3 route of storytelling. The Queen is dead, but not the rumors of a child. Not much has actually changed as Viking raids continue under the reign of Aella. Speaking of reign, a king needs a queen, thus the King of Wales offers his daughter's hand in marriage. This daughter is Morgana, played by Janet Leigh, who you may recognize from a number of horror films such as The Fog. King Aella is more than happy to accept, but draws attention to one member of this congregation in particular, Cousin Egbert, played by James Donald. It seems the cousin has been running his mouth about the so-called common knowledge that upon her deathbed, the queen spoke of a son in hiding. That's not all. Aella suspects there's a traitor in the room.
What do you mean, sir? Neither your lands nor the lands of your fellow conspirators have ever suffered any real harm.
Fellow conspirators?
For years you have schemed against me.
I'll not be made a scapegoat for your failure to stop the Viking raid.
Well, I've played enough Crusader Kings to know it's accident time. But oh boy, it seems RNG Jesus is smiling upon the traitor. Said traitor is now fleeing with the Vikings. He's been helping to commit raids. Fun fact, all these beautiful landscape shots are on location. Part of the film, like this, took place in Kvinnherad, Norway, which was a small town located near the Hardanger Fjord. Seen here, many of the extras seen are locals. Now might be a good time to mention that the Viking who let Egbert on the ship is Ragnar. Rushing to greet him is Kirk Douglas, playing his son Einar. Speaking of Egbert, Einar isn't the happiest to see him.
Lord Egbert, an ally. And drink to my father's return, Englishmen. You want the English to think we're barbarians?
They do have facial hair, or lack thereof, in common. Yes, it would seem Kirk Douglas offered a cash reward for whoever showed up with the best beard, only for the cast to find him clean-shaven. Showing the Englishman around, Einar tries to impress him with hawk hunting. However, duck doesn't seem to be on the menu for his bird of prey. Another hawk catches not only the duck, but the entire group's attention. Rushing to find his owner, they discover Eric, played by Tony Curtis. Being upstaged is one thing, but being upstaged by a slave is 10 times worse over. This prompts a fight which is ended both quickly and surprisingly brutally by Eric's hawk.
Kill!
Being restrained, Egbert orders his execution, but Einar delays that order. Later, during a feast, a slave is brought before Ragnar, who asks how the English would handle a slave after this infraction.
It's nothing much, just a pit full of wolves, half mad with starvation, and trained to appreciate the flavor of human blood.
Ah, you see? The English are civilized.
However, Einar instead asks for the slave to live, delivering one of the best lines of this film.
The sun will cross the sky 1,000 times before he dies. And you'll wish 1,000 times that you were dead.
Despite this, the priestess, Katala, played by Eileen Way, warns that Eric must not be killed. Should he die, then Thor's hammer would sound his death knell, and those responsible would suffer greatly. Okay then, let the tide and crabs kill him. We might tie him to a post, but it wasn't us who directly killed him. That's about as much of an accident as Agent 47 swapping prop pistols. But what's this? Seems what Einar tore off Eric was the pummel, which Egbert recognizes all too well. So about if that slave survives till morning.
If he's still alive when the tide turns, then any fool who fishes him out can have him. Survives.
Survive he does, with Egbert goading him on, reminding him Einar laughing at his death. He cries out for Odin, and with some orchestrals, a mighty wind is summoned. It's so powerful, it forces its way into the feast. After arguing off Einar from taking Eric, Egbert gives the pummel back.
Do you know what this is? Someday I'll tell you what it is. And you'll remember then that I saved you.
Time jumping once more, Egbert has drawn the maps, and Einar is sporting some fancy new practical effects. The plan Egbert and Ragnar agree upon is to sail for Wales, kidnap Morgana, and ransom her back to King Gaela. Though Egbert insists upon going with his slave to capture her, Ragnar decides that Einar will go. Oh, and also Katana has a compass made from, I think, meteorite that she shows off to Eric. Well, it's been like 30 minutes, and Morgana is having that Disney princess moment of, oh, I don't want to marry him. Can we get some action yet? Oh yeah, that'll do. What action it is, too. The Vikings open up with arrows and spears, while others actually hold their shields up to defend themselves against retaliation. The boarding turns everything into a melee, which comes to a head when Einar discovers Morgana. We then get the trailer line.
Why, Od, she'd make a fine Viking queen.
Get away from me!
Followed up by a pretty good line.
Pretty bird, pretty feathers. Build her a nest so she can hide. Too many hawks around here.
Coming home victorious, we see Einar's party performing a fun game. Basically start at the back and run across yours to the front without falling in, which, I'll be honest, not only looks fun, but I don't think any of the falls are really scripted. Behind the scenes, this took the stuntman a week to prep, and during one attempt Douglas fell into the water. Swimming over to director Richard Flesher, he asked if he got a good shot. As he swam back, the director remarked to the rest of the crew they were watching and recording an act not done for 1,000 years. During a victory feast that night, Einar asked Ragnar if his mother treated him similar to Morgana. After much back and forth, eventually Ragnar says that he won't ransom her, instead giving her the Einar as a wife. Sailing out, it becomes clear this company is a crowd.
All right, men. Everybody off. Morgana and I want to be alone. Good job, mate. And you up.
Going in, he expects a fight, but when she doesn't, it seems to kill the mood. Trying to carry on, a wild Eric appears and knocks Einar unconscious. Fleeing in a small boat, Eric insists they must all row to the surprise of the Englishwomen. When she finally begins to row, a classic woman problem occurs. Fashion.
This dress I'm wearing, it's too tight right in there. Oh! Mine isn't too tight.
Einar wakes and quickly rallies the men, including his father, to go after Eric and company. The smaller boat rows for their lives, but are gained on quickly. Luckily, they all soon end up within a dense fog, so dense that Ragnar's ship strikes a rock, tearing into the hull. Ragnar himself is sent overboard, lost within the fog. He is rescued by Einar, but upon realizing this, he fights back, briefly, before being rendered unconscious. Back with Einar, the disappearance is taken as death of Ragnar. Setting up camp come dawn, Eric and Morgana share a more peaceful moment than her time with Einar. As sad as dialogue can be, it's still well written in a way.
I belong to him. By my father's word as a Christian king.
What's your father's word compared to Odin's will?
Later, while discussing her breaking her pledge, Morgana compares breaking of a pledge to that of a Viking dying without a sword in their hand. Now in Aella's court, Morgana is sent to meditate on her pledge-breaking decision. During this, the priest notices an all-too-familiar pummel. But hey, that's enough of that. Remember what Egbert said they do to disobedient slaves? Well, same the prisoners. Given the honors of forcing him in, Ragnar pleads with Eric to grant him death with a sword in his hand. Granting his request, Ragnar smiles, scares the English, and jumps to his death at the hands of half-starved hounds. Now, Ragnar went out pretty well, but Eric still disobeyed Aella, and this isn't going over too well. No man can seem to kill Eric, but that doesn't mean a man can't fuck him up. Well, that got out of hand fast. Back with Einar, he's struggling to rally the Vikings to avenge Ragnar's death. He lacks the Lady Killer perk and charisma points, as barely any Vikings side with him. Sulking and praying to Odin, Eric appears behind Einar. He makes a deal that the both of them can rescue Morgana. Einar with his men and Eric with the means to sail through the fog and not simply stick to the English coast. You can probably see how this is quickly becoming a double dragon situation. At first, all the Vikings are hesitant and believe that vengeance for Ragnar is the death of Eric. However, with news that Ragnar died by a pit of hounds in England with sword in hand, and the lack of Eric's hand rallies them all.
He died fighting with the sword I gave him. And this was my thanks from Aella for letting Ragnar die like a Viking.
And so the army sets sail. With the aid of Eric, they land on English soil and march to Aella's castle with siege equipment. Word spreads fast as peasants flee, leaving behind abandoned villages. Arriving at the castle, the English folk are rushed inside and the outer bridge drawn. English soldiers line the walls ready to defend. With 19.5 minutes of the film left, the attack begins. Initially, it's a smashing success as the battering ram they've been dragging obliterates the initial gate, opening a breach as well as providing a bridge. The Vikings have the advantage of the defenders, smashing through their ranks quickly despite the fight they put up. However, their advance halts at the second bridge. Shields are actually used effectively, surprising in this late 50s film, while arrow volleys are exchanged. During this, axes are thrown at the strong wooden bridge. Okay, you go. No hand. Ah, fuck, you're right. Okay, I'll go. With several embedded, Einar, under cover of arrows, uses them as a makeshift ladder, getting within the walls and lowering the bridge. The attackers rush in, and we get some surprisingly good choreography of the melee. It's not even very one-sided, as while the English are losing, they manage to put up a solid fight. There is an example or two of the swords being very fake, but I will stand by saying that this attack holds up exceptionally well. Aella is cornered by Eric and fed to the same hounds that feasted upon Ragnar. At the same time, Einar is crashing into Morgana, and she confesses that she hates him, but loves Eric. We then get a scene of her desperately trying to catch Einar up on the plot before he kills Eric, though it's having little effect. Calling out a challenge to Eric, he rushes to defeat Einar just like Double Dragon. We also get a good line by Douglas.
Look at him, how he hastens to his death. He can't wait to die.
The fight begins with Einar quickly getting the upper hand. Eric desperately tries to survive against his onslaught strikes. While I'll admit the fight here isn't as good as the battle scenes, it's still entertaining. We get an even number or so of them swinging at each other's swords and actually swinging at each other. Eric even manages to push back using stump for blunt damage, but Einar uses headbutt. The fight continues with the balance swaying between the two. Then the classic trick happens to Eric, but when Einar goes to strike, he pauses. For a moment, he seems to recognize a glimmer of Ragnar's likeness. Wait, it couldn't be. Are we brothers? Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Wait, what? And so Einar dies with a sword in his hand, and Eric questioning why he hesitated at that crucial moment. A Viking funeral is held. Fun fact, while initially all arrows were meant to be loosed at once, a single extra let loose an arrow early, and the rest released on the director's count of 3. He liked the accent so much, he kept it in the final product. We end on a tapestry of our actors. Another fun fact, but this is one of the few 1950s films to actually have a full cast credit scene. The Vikings was filmed on a budget of $3.5 million, managing to bring in $6.2 million between the US and Canada, with $7 million overseas. It became the third most popular film at the British box office in 1958. Douglas took no salary, instead opting for 60% of the film's profits, earning an estimated $3 million. The most was clearly made of the budget, as while I can pick at historical inaccuracies, there is a lot that is well researched and portrayed. Richard Fleischer spent 2 years researching Norse culture to try and make the film as accurate as possible. The horses used by the Norse were a breed called Norwegian fjord horses, native to Norway. The Viking ships used in the film were recreated according to historical blueprints. The 3 full vessels proved to be actually too small to allow the actors to row efficiently, so every other hole was plugged, and this allowed the actors to row properly. At the start of the film, during the tapestry intro, it's mentioned that the Vikings were from the 8th to 9th century. This is slightly inaccurate, as the Viking age was 793 to 1066 AD. There's also mention of Odin as a god of war. He was a god of war, but so was Tyr. Now there's the question of the die with a sword in hand. The popularization of Vikings in modern culture has slightly altered our perception of their culture. Add in the influences of Christianity with its views of heaven and hell being black and white. In short, there are many areas of the afterlife, and even multiple parts to one's soul. I'll link a video exploring this more. Valhalla, or Valhall, was a place for warriors who proved themselves. I couldn't find anything about requiring a sword to specifically be in your hand upon death. The goal of souls within Valhalla was to fight, train, and feast until the days of Ragnarok and the twilight of the gods. Moving on, the one scene that I skipped over was Odin's test of unfaithful wives. This woman had been sleeping with Einar, and her husband, being suspicious, put her in this test. Cut the 3 braids to prove her innocence, ideally as far away from the skull as possible, both for lack of injury and a majority of hair. Now, if the man misses 3 times, he is killed.
Supposing he misses the braids and hits her?
Well, then she's guilty.
Right.
After scouring for information, I can confirm this was made up for the film, and there's no evidence of anything like this test being done in history. Closest you got is the whole fight, but that was from a few centuries later. The casting was an odd choice. While Douglas was great in the role during the summer of 1957, he was in his 40s. The character of Einar is meant to be in his 20s. What made the casting even stranger was that Ragnar's actor, Ernest Borgnine, was 1.5 months younger than Douglas. On a side note, Kirk Douglas would name his kid Eric after Tony Curtis's character. Later in the film Spartacus, Douglas would kill Curtis, the opposite of what occurred in this film's climax. While both men were willing to act in the cold air and colder water, Eileen Way refused to film it in rainy scenes, so a stunt double was put in place by a local girl, Barrett Wolin. This film and the novel it's based on are historical fiction. However, the film does have certain shreds of truth within it. The king at the start is called Edwin, and there was in fact a ruler of Northumbria called Edwin. He would die at the Battle of Hatfield Chase between his Northumbrian army and allies against the kingdom of Mercia with their allies. The battle saw Northumbria being wrecked hard, with both Edwin and his son Othfrith killed. His other son, Eadfrith, was captured and then killed. Eventually, a man named Aella would take control of Northumbria, capture Ragnar, and execute him via a pit of snakes, not hounds. We would then see the defeat of Aella at the hand of Ragnar's sons, which he supposedly had 5. A blood eagle would be performed. Funnily enough, the puppet king the great heathen army installed was named Egbert, just like the traitor character in the film. I couldn't find any historical examples of Kirk Douglas's helmet, but I will say it isn't the most implausible of helmets, though I'd expect in reality that leather would be steel. Perhaps it was this way due to the prosthetic. Said prosthetic was highly uncomfortable, forcing Douglas to only wear it for minutes before needing to remove it. The shields used wouldn't be strapped, they would have a grip in the center where the boss is located. Though I must point out that the actors do bother to utilize shields at multiple points. The idea of Vikings being unable to traverse fog is strange. From what I could gather, there are multiple ideas on how exactly Vikings would be able to navigate fog, including a sunstone. Needless to say, it's possible it while not optimal, they could travel in it. The film spans several locations. Norway was already mentioned, but places like the castle, Fort La Latte in Brittany, northwestern France. Its styling is from a time period set after the movie, though. Other stylings from later dates are Morgana's boat. Also, the chapel features Byzantine-style renderings of Jesus. Given the location and time period, the art would be of Celtic origin and not Eastern Roman Empire. The film premiered 11th of June 1958 in New York City. The final theatrical showing was 11th of October 2020 at the Lumiere Film Festival. The Vikings would win a number of awards, including the Zulu Eta Prize for the Best Actor, Kirk Douglas, Golden Laurel for Top Action Drama. So that's Vikings, I'll be honest. It's an enjoyable film, dated in parts, but it mostly holds up. The attention to detail coupled with the Hollywood theatrics mixes well for the most part. Looking up reviews shows a mix of reactions. The fighting, characters, music, and story are fun. This is a film you could literally have on in the background or simply watch as a comfort movie. The only genuine problem I had were the occasional prop fails that were not hidden well. Also, the time skips can mess with the pacing, leading to the film feeling uneven at times. King Aella was fine enough of an antagonist, but seems to take a backseat to the conflict of Eric and Einar. Not really a complaint for focusing on them, just that Aella doesn't stack up as well, his death being a short and quick add to this. He did his job and was well acted, but in terms of story contribution was kind of just there. Also Egbert, he was more prominent, but once they landed in England, he practically disappeared from the film entirely. In terms of this being a historical film, it's one I highly suggest. If you enjoyed something like The Northman, be sure to check this out. In terms of being an adventure film, I would also suggest it. This is simply a fun, classical adventure film with enough expertise on display to be enjoyable by a modern-day audience. Even more so, should you have any interest in Viking or period piece films. Speaking of The Northman, you can expect that one day. Just waiting to see if any more information comes out about it. Till next time, make sure your pommel doesn't fall off.
Take your magic elsewhere, holy man.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.